At family dinner, my sister mocked my daughter's hearing aid. My father said, "It's just a joke." "Lighten up." I stayed quiet. But my husband stood up. Without a word, he showed them the door. When they discovered next morning. The tension in our dining room was never loud, it was brittle. It felt like fine crystal perpetually waiting for a vibration that would shatter it into 1,000 pieces. On this particular Sunday evening, the air was thick with the scent of roasted garlic and the suffocating silence of judgment. 6-year-old Maya, her dark hair smoothed back, sat between David and me. Her small head tilted slightly as she concentrated on a glass of water. 3 weeks ago, her moderate hearing loss had been confirmed, and 3 weeks ago, we had begun the adjustment to her new device. It was a minuscule flesh-tone piece of technology, but to Maya it was a badge of courage. To me it was a relief, a promise of accessibility. My sister Jennifer, who always managed to make designer clothes look like a costume, shattered the silence first. She leaned across the gleaming mahogany table, her eyes narrowed in performative scrutiny. "What is that thing on her ear?" Jennifer asked, her voice carrying a theatrical, stage whisper quality that drew every eye. "It looks like some kind of robot attachment." I felt Maya's tiny hand freeze on the water glass. The noise of the house, the distant hum of the refrigerator, the gentle scrape of cutlery, was suddenly magnified, amplified perfectly by the device Jennifer had just insulted. David tensed, his shoulders hunching slightly, but my hand was already on his forearm. We had discussed this. I needed to handle the first confrontation. The weight of years of passive tolerance demanded that I speak. "It's a hearing aid, Jennifer," I said, keeping my tone low, aiming for calm authority. "Maya has moderate hearing loss." Jennifer laughed, a dry, brittle sound that did not reach her eyes. She looked around at my mother, who was sipping wine, and my father, who was carving a roast. "A hearing aid, at 6 years old." She paused, letting the disappointment land. "Well, that's unfortunate, Claire." My mother chimed in, her voice pitched delicately, as if discussing an embarrassing social faux pas. "Have you considered less visible options? Something more discreet for her age?" The question sliced deep. They weren't asking about Maya's health. They were asking about the family's image. "This is the most effective option for her development," I explained, refusing to drop my gaze. "Development?" my father repeated, lowering his knife. He took the cue from my mother and shifted the concern from aesthetics to burden. "Is she going to need special accommodations? Is she in a regular classroom?" "She is in a regular classroom, and yes, she may need some equipment," I responded, my patience thinning. Jennifer sighed loudly, leaning back in her chair, a study in martyrdom. "This is what happens when you wait until your mid-30s to have children. You get complications." Maya's face crumpled. She had been so excited to show the family, whom she loved unconditionally, her new tool. She understood. Their cruel words were ringing perfectly clear. "That's enough," David said, his voice quiet, dangerous. His fork clattered against the porcelain. "Oh, don't be so sensitive," my father interjected smoothly, immediately defaulting to his favorite line of attack. "Jennifer's just concerned. We all are. These things affect the whole family." "How exactly does Maya's hearing aid affect you?" I asked, pushing back, keeping my voice level. But the steel underneath was finally showing. "Well, there's the social aspect," my mother said, using the same hushed, delicate tone reserved for discussing distasteful gossip. "People notice. They ask questions. Your sister's children go to Westbrook Academy. They have friends whose parents know our family. It reflects on all of us." I looked over at my niece and nephew, who were intensely studying their plates, embarrassed and silent, the only two people at the table with an ounce of grace. "It's just a joke, Claire," my father added, seeing my silence. "Lighten up. You've always been too sensitive." Maya's eyes were filling with tears. That was my breaking point. "Maybe this is why Robot Girl doesn't talk much," Jennifer said to her wine glass, smirking. "The equipment doesn't work properly." David stood up abruptly. His chair scraped against the hardwood floor, a harsh, defining sound that silenced the entire room. He did not look at me, nor did he look at Maya. His eyes were fixed on the front door. He walked calmly across the room and opened the heavy wooden door, standing beside it without saying a single word. My father laughed nervously, trying to diffuse the situation with condescending humor. "David, what are you doing? Is this some kind of protest?" David simply stood by the open door, his expression completely neutral, the cold evening air drifting into the warm house. He gestured toward the outside. "Are you seriously asking us to leave?" Jennifer demanded, her voice rising in outrage. "Over a joke. This is ridiculous." David said quietly. It was the only word he spoke. It was enough. I gathered Maya into my arms. She buried her face against my shoulder, sobbing silently. "This is absurd," my mother protested, reaching for her purse. "We are your family." David remained by the door, silent, implacable. They left in a flutter of indignation, my father muttering about disrespect. My mother paused at the threshold, her voice low and venomous. "You will regret this," she said. When the door closed behind them, the house felt instantly peaceful, as if a great weight had been lifted. Maya lifted her head from my shoulder. "Are they mad at me?" she asked, her voice small. "No, sweetheart," I said, smoothing her hair. "They are wrong, and they are going to learn that." David sat back down beside us, his hand finding mine under the table. "I am sorry," he said. "I know you wanted to handle it your way. You did exactly right," I told him, looking at the door. The thread of my old life, my old responsibility, had been violently, irrevocably snapped. I knew what I had to do next. The silence after the door closed was profound, broken only by Maya's soft, hiccuping breaths against my shoulder. David sat beside me, his warmth a solid anchor. For years I had believed that if I just kept the peace, if I kept fixing the problems, the cruelty would eventually stop. But it hadn't. It had merely been granted a protective shield of my silence. David had shattered that shield in one single, quiet, righteous act. She asked me if she was broken. I whispered to David hours later. We were sitting on the couch in the dimly lit living room, the dirty dinner plates forgotten. Jennifer called her a robot girl, and she asked if she was broken. David pulled me close. "She is not broken, Claire, they are, and they have made their choice." His words confirmed what I knew. The time for maintaining the illusion of family had ended. The time for protection had begun. I carefully carried Maya upstairs and tucked her into bed. She was exhausted, but as she drifted off, she adjusted her small hearing aid, a comforting, familiar gesture. Seeing that tiny device, which represented so much hope and vulnerability, I felt the last of my decades-long restraint evaporate. I did not go to bed. I went to the small, secure office I kept locked in the back of the house. It was not a grand space, certainly nothing a woman with an estimated net worth of $400 million was expected to work in. But it was private, and most importantly, it was invisible. I powered on my laptop. The screen glowed, illuminating a digital monument to my secret life, a meticulously updated spreadsheet simply titled, "Family Overhead." It contained 6 years of data, tracking every single payment, transfer, and invoice I had quietly managed to keep my family afloat, while they mocked my perceived failures. I scrolled through the columns, each cell a sharp, numerical reminder of their entitlement. Westbrook Academy tuition for Jennifer's 2 children, $90,000 annually, channeled through a discreet educational trust I had established. My parents' country club membership, $18,000 a year, ensuring their privileged social circle remained intact. My father's luxury car lease, $1,400 every month. My mother's preferred out-of-network specialists, the ones who promised boutique care. Her standard insurance refused to cover approximately $3,200 monthly. And finally, my brother Tom's struggling consulting firm, $5,000 a month, the lifeline keeping his business loan from First National Bank current. I was the invisible foundation upon which their entire elevated lifestyle rested. I remembered the day my company, Audi Tech Solutions, a medical device manufacturer specializing in affordable, cutting-edge audiology equipment, went public 2 years ago. The initial public offering had valued it at $1.8 billion. The Wall Street Journal had covered the story, focusing on the revolutionary advancements in hearing aid technology we were making available globally. None of my family knew. They had been too busy celebrating Tom's small, heavily leveraged promotion. I had chosen to live modestly, driving a 7-year-old sedan and maintaining the appearance of the responsible, slightly struggling daughter. I did it because I was performing an experiment on their love. I wanted them to value me for who I was, for the time I spent, for the genuine efforts I made, not for the money I could provide. The experiment was a spectacular, painful failure. They had never valued me at all. I had simply been the backup plan, the reliable resource they could call upon while simultaneously using me as a punchline. I clicked out of the spreadsheet and opened my banking portal. The cursor hovered over the automated payment center. I felt nothing, no guilt, no nervousness, only a profound, cold sense of liberation. Each click was a definitive break, the snipping of a financial leash that had strangled my self-respect for years. I canceled the transfers one by one, the education trust, the car lease, the specialist payments, the country club fee, the business loan installment. The digital receipts piled up, confirming the cessation of support. It was done. The consequences were irreversible, immediate, and catastrophic for them. I closed the laptop, the screen going dark. The quiet of the office was immense. I knew they would call in a panic, assuming a banking error or a glitch. They would never, for a second, consider the truth that their disappointing daughter was the source of their luxury, and that source had just run dry. I had been their ghost in the machine, and now the ghost had walked away. I slept for exactly 4 hours, a deep, restorative sleep free of the anxiety that had been a constant companion for years. When I woke up, the house was still and cool, filled with the promise of a peaceful Monday morning. David was already up, making coffee. The scene felt entirely different from any previous Monday, liberated from the invisible performance of pretending everything was fine. I was in the kitchen, making Maya's favorite blueberry pancakes, when the first call came at 6:45 in the morning. The caller identification flashed Jennifer's name. I watched the phone buzz on the counter, a relentless demanding vibration. It was early, too early for a casual call, and the pattern of the ring, urgent, impatient, told me everything I needed to know. The automated system had done its work. The Westbrook Academy tuition transfer, scheduled for the first Monday of the month, had failed. I let it go to voicemail. 3 minutes later, my brother Tom called. Then my mother. Then my father. They were a synchronized chorus of panic, their habitual morning routines disrupted by the cold, hard logic of banking failure. Maya came downstairs, her face bright, her hearing aid nestled perfectly behind her ear. She was practicing identifying different sounds, a game her audiologist had encouraged. "Mommy, listen," she whispered, covering her mouth with her hand. "I hear the toaster clicking and the rain on the roof. They are so loud." I smiled, my heart swelling with pride and fierce protection. This thriving, precious child was the casualty of their cruelty, and she was the reason for my unwavering resolve. At 7:30, my mother's text arrived. It was not a question of concern, but an accusation of error. "Claire, Westbrook Academy called. They say the trust fund payments have been suspended. They assume there must be a banking error. Please call them immediately." I finished pouring Maya a glass of milk, my hand completely steady. I opened the message and typed my response. It was concise, factual, and denied them the illusion of control. "No error. I have withdrawn all education funding." I watched the phone instantly explode. It rang again, Jennifer's name flashing with increasing desperation, followed by a torrent of incoming text messages. I silenced the phone completely and slipped it into my back pocket. I would not allow their noise to penetrate the peace of Maya's morning. The drive to Maya's school was serene. We practiced reading the signs on the road: red, yellow, stop, go, and listened to the radio. I watched as Maya ran toward her classroom, pausing only to wave at her teacher. Her world was simple, safe, and flourishing. My world was about to become very loud. By the time I returned home, I had 17 missed calls and 34 text messages. I poured another cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen island, meticulously reading through the unfolding disaster. Jennifer's messages were a blend of entitlement and threat. "You can't do this, Claire. Sophie and Nathan's education isn't a game." My father's were dismissive and authoritative. "This is childish, Claire. We can discuss it like adults. Fix this immediately." Tom's were purely self-interested. "My business account shows a failed transfer. We need to talk. This is devastating." They still operated under the assumption that I was the same person they had mocked 24 hours earlier: sensitive, accommodating, and financially subservient. They thought they could demand, and I would comply. I decided to call Jennifer first. She was the one who had driven the spike into Maya's heart. She answered on the first ring, her voice tight with panic and rage. "What the hell are you doing?" she demanded, bypassing any pretense of politeness. "Westbrook just said Sophie and Nathan's tuition hasn't been paid. Do you have any idea the embarrassment this is causing?" "Yes, I do," I said, my voice calm, almost unnervingly so. "I've canceled the educational trust, Jennifer. The one I established 6 years ago." "What trust?" she scoffed, already maneuvering into denial. "The trust funded by my company, Audi Tech Solutions," I explained, letting the information hang in the silence. "We manufacture hearing aids. We went public 2 years ago." Silence stretched long enough that I had to check to see if the call had dropped. The only sound was the faint hum of the kitchen lights. "You don't have a company," Jennifer finally whispered, the sheer cognitive dissonance momentarily stripping her of her aggression. "I'm the founder and chief executive officer. We went public 2 years ago. The Wall Street Journal covered it, actually. You must have missed it." "This is insane," she breathed. "The trust helped your children access quality education," I continued, allowing no space for her disbelief. "But last night, you deliberately mocked my daughter's medical disability. You called her Robot Girl. So I've reassessed my support." "It was a joke," Jennifer said, desperation replacing her shock. She sounded small now, vulnerable, clinging to the only defense she had. "You know I didn't mean anything by it." "You are so sensitive, Claire." "Actually, Jennifer, I don't know that," I replied. My voice was utterly calm, an unnerving contrast to her unraveling panic. I stood by the kitchen island, looking out the window at the familiar, unassuming neighborhood. The only reality I acknowledged was the truth. "What I know is that you publicly humiliated a 6-year-old child at a family dinner. You did so despite knowing exactly how sensitive and anxious she has been about wearing a new medical device. The result of that humiliation is that my family's financial situation has changed accordingly." She tried the pity angle. "Claire, please. This is about Sophie and Nathan. Their education." "Yes, it is about their education," I agreed. "And Sophie and Nathan's education can be funded by their parents. You and your husband both work. You have options." I let the word options hang in the air, the implication heavy and deliberate. They had always operated with the luxury of choice, backed by my secret wealth. I, however, had spent the last 6 years choosing between the most effective medical device and the financial strain it caused, assuming I had no other choice but to struggle. They never saw that struggle, but they were certainly about to understand the consequences of ignoring it. "Public schools are an option," I continued, pressing the point home. "Scholarship applications are an option. Moving to a more affordable neighborhood might be an option. The same options, Jennifer, that you probably assumed I had when you were busy mocking my daughter's medical device." The silence on the line was cold and damning. Jennifer was weighing the shock of my immense wealth against the immediate reality of her children's elite education disappearing. For her, the prestige of Westbrook Academy was the air she breathed, and I had just pulled the plug. "You can't do this to me," she finally managed, her voice cracking. "I'm your sister." "A sister supports her family, Jennifer," I corrected, closing the narrative loop. "A sister does not deliberately try to shame a child for a disability. When David and I return to family dinners, it will be with family who respect us, not with people who benefit from our hidden support while trying to break our daughter's spirit." I did not wait for her reply. I ended the call. The feeling was one of profound relief, like pulling an arrow from a wound. That wound, however, extended beyond Jennifer. It ran through my parents, who had taught me that their reputation was more valuable than my feelings, and through Tom, whose entire professional existence was a performance funded by me. I immediately dialed the country club's main billing department. The receptionist answered cheerfully. "This is Claire Morrison. I need to cancel the family membership under the Henderson account." I used my maiden name for the account, the name they still assumed I was merely clinging to. "One moment, Mrs. Morrison," the representative said, pulling up the information. "You are listed as the payment guarantor, Claire. Are you aware this will affect 4 family members' access to the club, including the primary member, Mr. Henderson?" "I am aware," I confirmed. "Please proceed with immediate cancellation. I will not be reinstating the payment." The cancellation confirmed, I hung up. 30 seconds later, my father called. He did not bother with any preamble, the shock of the country club news having eclipsed the tuition issue. "What is happening?" he demanded, his usual paternal authority fraying around the edges. "Your mother just received a call from the club. They're saying our membership has been canceled. And I just had a message from your mother's doctor's office asking for a new payment method. I've canceled all the recurring payments I've been making on your behalf, Dad," I explained, running through the list like an auditor. "The country club membership, Mom's out of network specialists, your car lease, Tom's business support, all of it. I've stopped." There was genuine confusion in his voice, not just anger. "You've been making payments. What are you talking about, Claire?" I could almost see the puzzle pieces failing to fit in his head. The father who had dismissed my MBA as nice and questioned my company was now being told he was fundamentally dependent on me. He had constructed an entire, convenient narrative about my failures and his family's success, and that narrative was currently imploding. "Where exactly did you think the money was coming from, Dad?" I asked, my voice holding a faint, distant echo of sadness. "Your insurance doesn't cover Mom's preferred oncologist. Your investment portfolio took major losses in 2020. Tom's consulting business operates at a deficit. I've been covering approximately $18,000 monthly in family expenses for the past 6 years." The scale of the amount caused a stunned silence. $18,000 every single month for 72 months. It was an overwhelming sum of invisible support. "That's impossible," he said flatly, retreating into pure denial. "You don't have that kind of money." "We have considerably more than that kind of money," I corrected him. "I built a medical device company that revolutionized affordable hearing aid technology. We have contracts with 16 countries and supply chain partnerships with every major audiology clinic in North America. Last quarter's revenue was $230 million. I listened to him breathe, his shallow intakes of air the only sound. He was processing a life-altering fact that completely invalidated his long-held, comfortable belief about his disappointing daughter. The silence was my victory. "Why?" my father finally asked, the surprise in his voice giving way to a calculated, strained reasonableness. "Why would you cancel our support over a simple misunderstanding? Surely, a joke is not worth ruining your family's finances." He still hadn't grasped the fundamental truth. He was still trying to reframe profound cruelty as a minor social misstep. This was the moment I had waited for. The moment to articulate the precise nature of his failure. "It was not a misunderstanding, Dad," I said, my voice rising marginally, but remaining controlled. "Jennifer deliberately mocked Maya's hearing aid, her essential medical device. When I objected, you told me to lighten up. You minimized my feelings and defended the cruelty directed at my 6-year-old child." I continued, the details becoming increasingly damning. "Mom suggested we hide Maya's medical device because it might embarrass the family socially. This wasn't an accident of poor phrasing. This was your collective decision to treat my child, my daughter, as a shameful burden." His defenses were weak now, stripped bare by the overwhelming reality of his financial dependence. "We didn't mean it that way, Claire. We were concerned." "How did you mean it then?" I challenged, pressing for the accountability I knew he was incapable of giving. "Explain to me the kind interpretation of calling a disabled child robot girl at a family dinner." There was no answer, just the sound of his frustrated breathing on the other end of the line. He could not, and would not, apologize for the action. He only lamented the consequence. I moved to the final, necessary pronouncements, laying out the timeline of their impending financial collapse like a meticulous, unforgiving weather report. "The Westbrook tuition bills will arrive in 10 days. I continued. $90,000 for both children, due immediately. The country club will bill Mom's account directly starting next month. Your car lease payment is due in 3 weeks. Tom's business loan installment is scheduled for the 15th. These are all your responsibilities now. Claire, be reasonable," he protested weakly. "We can't afford all of that." "You know we can't. Then you will need to make choices," I stated simply. "The same choices you assumed I was making for the past 6 years while raising a child with significant medical needs. Downsize your lifestyle. Use in-network doctors. Drive a more modest car. Explore public school options." I paused, allowing the words to sink in. These are all perfectly reasonable solutions you would probably recommend to me if I were asking for advice about my perceived financial struggles. Now you get to recommend them to yourselves." My mother's voice, sharp with tears, cut across the line. She must have snatched the phone from my father. "Sweetheart, please. We love you and Maya. Last night was unfortunate, but we are family. We can fix this." Her tone was desperate, pleading, yet still lacking the core admission of guilt. She was pleading for the status quo, not for forgiveness. "Family doesn't mock a child's disability," I said quietly, the heartbreak finally returning. But it was controlled now, channeled into steely resolve. "Family doesn't suggest hiding medical equipment out of social embarrassment. Family doesn't assume financial struggles while simultaneously benefiting from hidden support you never earned. We didn't know you were helping us financially," she said, her voice rising in defensive denial. "You never told us. You never asked." I countered, delivering the final, crushing judgment. "You never wondered how a single mother with a medically complex child seemed so calm about the bills. You built a narrative about my failures and stopped seeing the reality in front of you. You were so busy pitying me, you never noticed you were completely dependent on me." I heard a frantic fumbling sound as the phone was dropped on their end. Before I could hear another word, the screen flashed. Tom was calling. He was next. Tom called as soon as I disconnected from my parents. I answered instantly. The emotional tide had shifted entirely now. There was no room for pretense, only the cold reckoning of cause and effect. "Claire, my business account is overdrawn." Tom's voice was tight and panicky, stripped of his usual polished confidence. "The loan payment didn't transfer. What is going on?" "I am scheduled to meet with a potential investor this afternoon. This cannot happen." His focus, predictably, was not on Maya, but on the potential for personal embarrassment and financial collapse. This was the highest stake for him, the total ruin of the image he had painstakingly maintained. "I've stopped covering your business loan," I said simply, allowing the silence to stretch between us, letting the full gravity of the statement land. "What business loan?" His confusion was genuine, the final desperate resistance to accepting the truth. "I never took a loan from you. I secured a loan from First National Bank years ago. It must be some bank error." This was the deepest part of my hidden support, the earliest intervention. It was the moment I had officially decided I would secretly finance their illusions. "You took a loan from First National Bank 6 years ago when your consulting firm was failing and you were about to lose everything." I recited, the details drawn from the meticulous file on my spreadsheet. "I have been making the monthly payments since then. $5,000 a month for 72 months. That's $360,000 in total, paid entirely by me." Tom was gasping for air on the line. The reality was so massive, so counter to his perception of his own competence, that he couldn't process it. "By the way," I added, driving the final nail into the coffin of his self-deception, "you never questioned why the bank stopped sending payment reminders, or why you never saw any interest statements. You just assumed it was taken care of." "Oh my God," he breathed. "I thought the bank had some kind of grace period program. I thought I'd earned a deferment through being such a valuable client." "The program was me, Tom," I confirmed, the phrase tasting like ash on my tongue. "The program was me being the responsible sibling who couldn't bear to watch you lose everything. It's ending now." He finally retreated to the one thing they all understood, the catalyst. "Why?" "Because of Jennifer's stupid comment last night. Because of a little joke." This was my moment to face the ghost of my past. The silent, accommodating daughter who prioritized family peace over her own sanity. I refused the lie. I stood firm on the truth. Because of Jennifer's stupid comment last night, yes. But also because all of you decided that my daughter's essential medical device was an appropriate target for mockery. I let the details cascade, relentless and irrefutable. Because when I objected, Dad told me to lighten up. Because Mom suggested we make Maya's hearing aid less visible to protect the family's social standing. Because not one of you considered how your words affected a 6-year-old child. The shock gave way to rapid calculation. Tom understood the gravity of $360,000 disappearing. He knew what he had to say to fix it. "We will apologize, Claire," he rushed to assure me. "We will make it right. We will send flowers. We will apologize to Maya. Apologies don't undo the damage, Tom, I countered, the memory of Maya's small, tear-streaked face burning in my mind. Maya cried herself to sleep last night. She asked me if she was broken, if her hearing aid made her less lovable. Those are questions no child should ever have to ask, because their family mocked them at dinner. I repeated the truth slowly, deliberately, ensuring every word resonated with the weight of her suffering. I wasn't fighting for money. I was fighting for her dignity. You never cared enough about me to ask if I was struggling, but you were quick to judge me when I wasn't performing to your standards. That ends now. I did not wait for his inevitable breakdown or his renewed pleas. I ended the call. I turned off my phone completely. The house was finally entirely silent. The battle had been fought, not with noise and shouting, but with spreadsheets and canceled payments. The war was over. I had chosen Maya's worth over their approval, and the choice brought a wave of exhausted, profound peace. I walked out of my office, leaving the ghost of the accommodating daughter behind me. The consequences for them had been set in motion, and there was nothing left to do but wait for the inevitable cascade. The next few weeks passed in a silence heavier than the one David had imposed at the dinner table. My phone remained off, but the consequences of my actions resonated through the quiet. The flow of consequences was swift, absolute, and predictable, exactly mirroring the $18,000 a month I had severed. Jennifer withdrew Sophie and Nathan from Westbrook Academy. The prestige that had been her most vital social currency was instantly gone, forcing her to enroll the children in the local public school system she had spent a decade disparaging. The local public school was perfectly adequate, of course. It simply did not carry the necessary social cachet. My father sold his luxury car, a sleek German sedan that was a totem of his success, and bought a used sedan. The money that had funded his lease was gone, and the sudden expense of a new vehicle demanded immediate, visible sacrifice. My mother canceled her private pilot's studio membership and the country club membership. She was forced to shift her specialized medical care to in-network doctors, a process I knew was frustrating and inconvenient, but entirely manageable. Tom's consulting business officially filed for bankruptcy protection. Without the constant $5,000 infusion to cover the loan, the whole precarious structure collapsed. He was forced to swallow his pride and take a corporate position he had always considered beneath his independent stature. The family group chat, once a relentless stream of vacation photos and superficial social updates, went completely silent. No more bragging, no more subtle put-downs. The common denominator of their lifestyle, the hidden financial security, was gone, and with it, their ability to perform their elevated identities. They were simply people with bills they had to pay, living the lives they always pretended I lived. 2 weeks after the night of the dinner, my mother showed up at my door. She didn't call first, knowing I would not answer. She looked tired, her perfectly coiffed appearance was slightly crumpled, and she was wearing a department store sweater instead of her usual designer wool. I let her in, leading her to the living room, the site of the confrontation. "I didn't come to beg," she said, her voice flat. "I came because I need to understand. Why did you never tell us about your success? About Audi Tech Solutions? Why did you hide it?" The question was the core of her confusion, the last remaining piece of the puzzle that didn't fit her narrative of my life. I looked at her, seeing not the judgmental matriarch, but the flawed woman I had spent years trying to please. "Would it have changed how you treated me, Mom?" She considered this honestly, and the honesty was jarring. "Probably. Yes, we would not have worried. That's exactly why I didn't tell you," I replied. "I wanted you to value me as a person, not as a resource. I didn't want my worth to be conditional on my ability to solve your problems or fund your lifestyle." "We did value you, Claire," she protested, a fresh wave of defensiveness rising. "You are our daughter. Name one time," I challenged quietly. "Name one time in the past 6 years that you celebrated an achievement of mine that did not involve a degree or a domestic role." The silence returned, heavy and undeniable. "You celebrated Jennifer's wedding," I pointed out gently, "and Tom's minor promotion. But when I finished my MBA, you said it was nice. When I founded my company and started hiring engineers, you asked when I would get a real job with a reputable firm. You were disappointed, and I accepted that. I built my company anyway. I became successful beyond anything you imagined. I paused, allowing the full weight of the revelation to land. And I used that success to help you because, at my core, I believe that is what family is supposed to do, even when it's one-sided. My mother's face finally crumbled, the tears starting in earnest. "And we ruined it," she whispered, her voice thick with genuine shame. "We ruined it by being cruel to a child." "Yes," I confirmed. "By showing me that no amount of help, no amount of financial sacrifice, would earn genuine respect. You showed me that you would mock my daughter's disability while cashing checks funded by the very technology that helps her hear. That was the moment you told me, clearly and without doubt, what your definition of family truly was." She left without asking for the financial support to be restored. That, more than anything else, surprised me. The realization of the moral bankruptcy, not the financial one, was what had finally hit her. I hadn't just removed money, I had removed the illusion that their cruelty was acceptable. The house was quiet again. The toxic presence was gone. The painful truth had been spoken. Now it was time to move forward, for Maya and for me. A month after the Great Reckoning, a profound peace settled over our house, an atmosphere lighter and more honest than any we had ever known. The space the toxicity had occupied was now filled with Maya's growth and joy. She came home one afternoon from school, bounding into the kitchen with a stack of construction paper. She was excited about an art project, one that had required her to draw her family. She laid the picture out on the counter. It was colorful and confident: me, David, and herself. There were no grandparents, no aunt or uncle, and no cousins. "Is this our family, sweetie?" I asked, kneeling beside her. Maya traced the figures with a pink crayon, her small finger pointing decisively. "Yes," she said, her voice confident and clear, amplified gently by her hearing aid. "The people who love me." It was the simplest, most profound resolution to the entire conflict. She had defined her worth not by the complex, demanding web of obligation and biology, but by the straightforward measure of love and respect. Maya adjusted beautifully to her hearing aid. Her teachers reported significant improvements in her auditory processing and her social confidence. She made new friends who thought the discrete technology was cool and scientific. She was thriving, free from the crushing weight of family judgment, thriving because we had chosen to prioritize her emotional health over their social image. The money I had been spending, the $18,000 monthly I had poured into maintaining my family's fragile dignity, I redirected entirely. I established the Maya Foundation, an organization dedicated to supporting children with hearing loss. We funded scholarships for low-income families to access the best hearing aids, granted research funds to audiology clinics, and created summer camps where children with medical devices could simply be themselves, celebrated instead of ridiculed. The financial consequences for the Henderson family continued. They learned to downsize, adjust, and manage their finances without a hidden safety net. They learned what I had been doing for 6 years, while they mocked my perceived failures and questioned my professional viability. They had been given a necessary lesson in consequences and self-sufficiency. And Maya learned something far more important than any of them. She learned that her worth was not determined by people too small to see it. She learned that her hearing aid was not a flaw to hide, but a powerful tool that helped her experience the world. She learned that family means people who celebrate you, people who prioritize your well-being, not people who tolerate you while secretly benefiting from your success. The Henderson family image survived their financial adjustments, but they survived without my invisible support holding them up while they held me down. I had traded the heavy burden of purchased love for the quiet, sustaining peace of earned self-respect. And for the first time in my life, I knew I was truly home.